Pandit Sunderlal Committee Report. Operation Polo was a military operation in which the Indian Armed Forces invaded the Nizam-ruled princely state, Hyderabad, annexing it into the Indian Union. Operation Polo is the code name into the Indian Union. Operation Polo is the code name of Hyderabad police action in September 1948. On day 5 of this operation, the 17th of September 1948, the Nizam, Mir Osman Ali Khan, announced a ceasefire which ended the armed action. The operation led to massive communal violence and violations by the police. This prompted Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru to appoint a commission, led by Pandit Sunderlal, to investigate the situation. The Hyderabad Massacre, the mass killings of Muslim civilians that took place in the aftermath of the Indian invasion of Hyderabad state in September 1948, Operation Polo. The killings, perpetrated by Indian soldiers, as well as local militias, resulted in the deaths of more than 200,000 Muslim civilians from September to October 1948 in former Nizam Hyderabad state. This chapter of history does not feature prominently in our textbooks. Pandit Sunderlal Committee Report begins now. We were asked by the Government of India to proceed to Hyderabad state on a goodwill mission. After completing our task there, we now beg to submit our report. Delegation consisting of Pandit Sunderlal, Qazi Abdul Ghaffar and Maulana Abdullah Misri on 29th of November 1948 and returned to Delhi on the 21st of December 1948. During this period we toured 9 out of 16 districts of the state, visiting 7 district headquarters, 21 towns, 23 important villages. In addition we interviewed over 5 which we had not visited. Further 31 public meetings at various places and 27 private gatherings of Hindus, Muslims, congressmen, officials, members of Jamiat-e-Ulema and of the Ittihad al-Muslimin, the staffs and students of some educational institution and of the Hindustani Parchur Sabha etc. were addressed by members of the delegation. Amongst important men and officials interviewed by us may be mentioned the Nizam, Prince of Berar, Major General Chaudhry, Mr. Bakul the Chief Civil Administrator, Swami Ramananda Tritha, Dr. Malkote, Ramachandra Rao, Ramachari, K. Vadia, Venkat Rao, Abul Hassan Syed Ali, Nawab Ali Yawar Yun, Nawab Zain Yar Yun, Donde Raj, Maulana Abu Yusuf, Malvi Abul Khair and Maulana Hamiduddin Kamar Farooqui. At all these meetings and interviews the main problem discussed was that of the creation and maintenance of cordial relations between the communities. Appeals were made to the people to forget the past and to work unremittingly for the establishment of harmony amongst themselves. The aim and policy of the Indian Union was also fully explained and special emphasis was laid on the objective, which was the establishment of secular government for the people of Hyderabad, in which all of them irrespective of religion, caste or creed will enjoy equal freedom and equal opportunities for development and progress. It was made perfectly clear that the military administration had been charged with the duty of implementing that policy. We clarified our position whenever opportunity presented itself, saying that ours was not a commission of investigation or inquiry into events preceding or following the police action, and that ours was merely a goodwill mission charged with the task of restoring better communal relation. All the same, we feel it our duty to bring to your notice what we saw and gathered in our tourings, as it has, in our opinion, an importance all its own. Hyderabad state has 16 districts, comprising nearly 22,000 villages. Out of them only 3 districts remained practically, though not wholly, free of communal trouble, of Razakars, and then during the reprisals that followed the collapse of that organization. In another 4 districts the trouble had been more serious but nothing like the havoc that overtook the remaining 8. Out of these again, the worst sufferers have been the districts of Osmanbid, Gulbarga, Bidar and Nanded, in which for the number of people killed during and after the police action was not less, if not more than 18,000. In the other 4 districts, Aurangabad, Bir, Nalgonda and Medak, who lost their lives numbered at least 5,000. We can say at a very conservative estimate that in the whole state at least 27 to 40,000 people lost their lives during and after police action. We were informed by the authorities that these 8 were the most affected districts and needed most the good and succeeded, we might say, to some extent at least, in dispelling the atmosphere of mutual hostility and distrust. It is a significant fact that out of these 8 districts, the 4 or worst affected districts, Osmanabad, Gulbarga, Bidar and Nanded, had been the main strong Azam Razvi, which had been a big business center. With rich Kuchi Muslim merchants, the killing continued over 20 days. Out of a population of about 10,000 Muslims, there we found barely 3,000 people still in the town. Over 1,000 had been killed and the rest had run away with still in the town. Over 1,000 had been killed and the rest had run away with little else besides their lives and completely ruined financially. Their crimes. Almost everywhere in the affected areas communal frenzy did not exhaust itself in murder, alone in which at some places even woman itself in murder, alone in which at some places even women and children were nor spared, rape. Abduction of Muslim women, sometimes out of the state to Indian Union such as Sholapur and Nagpur, loot, arson, desecration of mosques, forcible conversions, seizure of mosques, forcible conversions, seizure of houses and land. Followed or accompanied by killing. Tens of crore worth of property was looted or destroyed. The sufferer were Muslims who formed a hopeless minority in rural areas. The perpetrators of these atrocities not limited to those who had suffered at the hands of volunteers. Not to be non-Muslims of Hyderabad state. These later were aided and abetted by individuals and bands of people, with or without arms, from across the border, who had infiltrated through in the wake of the Indian Army. We found Hindu communal organization from Sholapur and other Indian towns as also some local and outside communists participated in these riots and in some cases actually led by the rioters. Army and the police duty also compels us to add that we had absolutely unimpeachable evidence to the effect that there were instances in which men belonging to the Indian Army and also to the local police took part in looting and even other crimes. During our tour we gathered, at not a few places, that soldiers encouraged, persuaded and in few cases even compelled the Hindu mob to loot Muslim shops and houses. At one district town, the present Hindu head of the administration told us that there was general loot of Muslim shops by the military. In another district, a Muslim house, soldiers and a Tahsildar wife was molested. Complaints of molestation and abduction of girls against Sikh soldiers particularly were by no means rare. We were generally told that at many places out of the looted property, cash, gold, silver was taken away by the military, while Unfortunately, there was a certain element in the army which was not free from the communal feelings, probably because some of them could not forget the atrocities committed elsewhere on their own kith and kin, lest we might be understood to imply a slur on the Indian Army and its officers in Hyderabad, sense of duty. In General Chaudhry, we found a man without any tinge of communal prejudice, a firm disciplinarian and true gentleman. Before concluding this summary of atrocities committed We would like to affirm that we have not made any of the statement lightly or without realizing to the full of our responsibility in making them. What we have seen with our own eyes and what we were told not only be the sufferers and their friends but by reliable parties, both Hindus and Muslims. By the known Hindu supporters of Congress and Muslim opponents of the volunteers. By official and Muslim opponents of the volunteers. By officials of the past and present administrations and by responsible individuals has been carefully shifted and discounted by us before arriving at our conclusions. We have refrained from entering into details of the evidence on which our conclusions are based. The picture presented in the foregoing pages, we turn to incidents that we may be taken as silver lining to the dark clouds of communal strife. We were given by Muslim instances in which Hindus had defended and given protection to their Muslim neighbors. Men and women, even at the cost of their own lives. Hindu weavers defended Muslim weavers against Hindu and protected them often at a very heavy cost, including loss of life to themselves. Many Hindus helped in the recovery of abducted Muslim women. Hindu Raj and Muslim Raj. This communal trouble followed close upon the heels of the police action and the consequent collapse of the Razakars organization, which had stood in the Muslim mind as an effective barrier against the establishment of responsible government, which was synonymous to the average Hyderabadi Muslim with Hindu Raj because it would be based on the will of the Hindu majority. Muslim masses were generally slow to realize that their sufferings were the inevitable repercussions of the atrocities committed on the Hindus only, a few days before, by the Razakars. The Muslims in Hyderabad. Such of them as dared publicly to oppose madness paid heavily for their temerity. So much so that one of them fell before bullet of assassin. Like the Razakars, the perpetrators of crimes against the Muslims encouraged the belief that they had the backing of the authorities. Color was lent to this belief by some actions and omissions of such people in authority as had been unable to purge their minds of the communal virus. Suspicious thus created as regards the good faith of the Indian government were not the unnatural outcome of the sufferings of hundreds of thousands of people in which tens of thousands lost their lives and others practically all that make life worth living. In this campaign of retaliation at least 100 were made to suffer for the sins of each guilty. Fortunately, during the days of the trouble, the conduct of some of congressmen added to the distrust of the Muslim population. We mentioned a few instances of what we heard about the conduct of some persons posing as congressmen. It was reported to us during the tour that at some places persons claiming to be congressmen took the law in their own hands and adopted various devices of extracting money from panicky Muslims. At several places we heard the complaint that such persons were going about approaching Muslims who had not left their homes or those who had returned extracting money from them against promises of called protection. At one place, Deputy Superintendent of Police complained to that these Congress people were making administration difficult by such conduct. At one important town, a rich Kuchi merchant whose shops had been looted and partly burned complained to us that he could get back possession of his buildings after passing a check of 15,000 rupees and paying 10,000 rupees in cash to some Congresswala. We were told that the congressman had auctioned cultivable land left behind by Muslims on condition that half the crops were to be handed to the state. Congress are under consideration of the Congress High Command. We hope that for the sake of the good name of the National Congress, the Hyderabad State Congress will be purged of these defects and recurrence of such conduct will be made impossible. Doubts and suspicious in the minds of the namely the complaints of some of those who had been in state service before the police action and who had lost their jobs. We have received long list of names of persons dismissed, degraded, suspended or otherwise penalized in various departments. We are quite prepared to believe that some of these ought to continue in the best interests of administration, but we have reasons to believe that a large numbers have suffered and are suffering for no faults of theirs. Their may cases of mere suspicion are false accusations. In fact, we controvertible evidence of the innocence of some of these men. We are sure these men can be depended upon for their loyalty to the new regime. The fact also remains that these readjustments have landed a very large number of Muslim families in considerable economic difficulties. We feel that all such state servants, unless they are definitely proved guilty, should be reinstated as early as possible. The fact is that bitter experience has brought home to the Hyderabad Muslims the dire consequences of communalism. Naturally, believe that they would be perfectly happy and contented if they can be taken out of the present atmosphere of distrust and frustration. Suggestions in view of the foregoing observations, we take the liberty of making the following suggestions which, in our opinion, would help in the establishment of communal peace and harmony in Hyderabad. We do not mean to imply that measures suggested have not yet engaged the attention of the present administration. But we are presenting a list of problems which we are convinced deserve consideration. We mention them in the order of consideration. We mention them in the order of priority which, in our view, they deserve. 1. The foremost and immediate need is that those who have suffered should receive all necessary reliefs. A. Houses and lands, from which Muslims have been dispossessed and which have not yet been restored to them by ejectment, if necessary of those in possession at present. B. Houses which have been damaged should be repaired and made habitable. C. Abducted women and children who have not yet recovered should be recovered from places both inside and outside the Hyderabad state, like to their lawful guardians. And in case the latter cannot be found, provision should be made for their maintenance, employment and training in some means of livelihood. D. Work should be provided for those who lost their means of livelihood or breadwinners or are otherwise reduced destitute, including establishment of handicrafts and cottage industries in the provision of the capital, implement of trade etc., as also provision for maintenance in deserving cases. E. Needy agriculturists should be subsidized and given all necessary help for the resumption of their occupation. 2. Mosques should be restored to those entitled to look after them, and whatever idols have been installed, they should be removed. 3. All conversion to another faith brought about during this period should be declared null and void. Respectfully suggest that a mixed committee of officials and non-officials, both Hindus and Muslims, should be immediately appointed. 5. Our second suggestion in this behalf is that the Nizam should be pressed to contribute from his private purse towards the relief and rehabilitation of this suffering subject, who was invited by the Nizam for an interview, made the suggestion to personally. 6. We are definitely informed that a large number of persons who took part in these atrocities and even led the mob are still at large in districts. We know that the rounding up of miscreants engaging the attention of the military governor. Therefore, we need only emphasize the necessity of accelerating and supplementing these measures wherever necessary. 7. Not without some hesitation, we are perhaps overstepping our legitimate province by touching upon the subject of future administrative changes. The fact that we have decided to take the risk is the measure of the importance which we attach to the subject. We have already drawn attention to the very real fear in the Muslim mind that a responsible government in Hyderabad, implying, as it does, a government based on the will of the Hindu majority, is likely to be little short of disaster considering the present strained relations of the two communities, besides a cleavage in the Congress ranks. We are constrained to remark the satisfactory account of relief during the period of trouble. Therefore, the time of any radical change in the form of government does not appear to be pro-pious. We would respectfully suggest their postponement for at least some years to come. For allied reasons, we would also suggest the inclusion for the present of at least 2 more Muslims enjoying the confidence of their coreligionists in the administrative setup of the state at the highest level and in an effective capacity. 8. While we fully realize the necessity of retaining and employing in the services only dependable persons, we would still urge the advisability of caution in making such changes as might lend color to the existence of anti-Muslims or anti-Hyderabadi bias in the minds of authorities. 9. Lastly, we would that mercy be allowed to temper justice to the fullest extent in the punishment of wrongdoers. We know that the military governor is setting suspected Razakars free and is favorably considering the release of all but the very worst and proved lawbreakers. May we also recommend that all those who public exceptions as possible. In cases where imposition of the extreme penalty of law is clearly justified, it may not be imposed. Such human acts of forbearance would remove suspicions and win hearts and complete the good work, so well begun, of establishing. Before closing, we must gratefully acknowledge the valuable help and willing cooperation given to us by the military administration in Hyderabad, by government officials in the districts we visited, by public workers and prominent citizens, and lastly by our 2 secretaries Farooq Syed and P.P. Amkar. Confidential note. On receipt of news of communal distrust still existing in Hyderabad state, in spite of peace established. Confidential note. On receipt of news of communal distrust still existing in Hyderabad state, in spite of peace established by the new administration, a goodwill mission went from Delhi to Hyderabad. Attached instances of the Government of India. The mission consisted of Pandit Sunderlal Qazi Abdul Ghaffar and Maulana Abdullah Misri. Mr. Farooq Shakari and Mr. P.P. Ambulkar accompanied the mission as secretaries. The deputation reached Hyderabad in the afternoon of the 29th of November 1948. The remaining part of the day and the greater part of refugee camps in Hyderabad state and in meeting number of prominent Hindu-Muslim gentlemen of the city. On the evening of the 30th of November 1948, at the invitation of the military governor Major General J.N. Chaudhry, Pandit Sunderlal accompanied military governor in his tour through a few of the districts of the state. They covered about a couple of 100 miles in jeeps and passed through important towns of Bidar, Latur, Yadgar, and besides about a score of other villages. At the first four places, Pandit Sunderlal, at the suggestion of military governor, addressed for a few minutes at each place the large gathering held in honor of the military governor, and appealed for communal harmony, goodwill, assuring the people that the military administration is in which people of all creeds and faiths will have equal freedom of belief in, practice and equal civic rights. Members of the mission noticed it with some satisfaction that in each of these gatherings Hindus and Muslims mixed freely together and appeared to be living happily to be good neighbors. Pandit Sunderlal and his team returned to Hyderabad on the night of the 1st of December 1948. From the 2nd of December, the next 4 days were spent at Hyderabad again in meeting large number of people including Hindus and Muslims, officials and non-officials, congressmen and others. Hindus and Muslims, officials and non-officials, congressmen and others. and in addressing several private gatherings and public meetings. On the 6th of December, the mission divided itself into two parties. One consisting of Pandit Sunderlal, Qazi Abdul Ghaffar and local gentlemen from Hyderabad. Other consisting of Maulana Abdullah Misri and Mr. Farooq and few other local friends. The first party visited the districts of Bidar, Osmanabad, Gulbarga, Nanded and Medak. Second party visited the districts of Aurangabad. Both parties returned to Hyderabad on the 12th of December 1948. During the week from 6th to the 12th, both parties included, we visited 51 places big and small, and took evidence about condition prevailing in about 150 more villages. We recorded the evidence of over 200 witnesses, including Hindus and Muslims, officials and non-officials, congressmen and others, and examined orally at least double that number. In some cases, either at the desire of the witness or on our own initiative. We held the examination in camera, and in other cases sometimes we examined people in groups also. Our witnesses also included a large number of women's. From 13th December to the 19th number of women's. From 13th December to the 19th December 1948. We spent in the Hyderabad partly scrutinizing the evidence we had collected and partly in the meeting people and also in addressing the gatherings and public meetings. The main theme of our addresses on all such occasions was explaining to the people the secular nature of the administrator, assuring them of equal opportunities and equal rights for all, and appealing to the people to forget the past and to live in peace and maintain perfectly cordial relations between the communities. As a result of our inquiries, we came of late Wikar al-Umara, and of the late Maharaja Sir Kishan Prasad, that is, only up to a couple of decades back, Hyderabad was almost an ideal place as far as relations between the various communities are concerned. We may not enter here into facts and illustrations. Autocratic. Corruption increased from the highest to the lowest. Even comparatively small posts were auctioned personally by the ruler to the highest bidder. Under such condition, efficiency was bound to suffer more and more. Good ministers like Sir Akbar Haidari and Sir Mus. Bold Arya Samaj entered the Hyderabad state from outside. They asserted the freedom of speech and freedom of practice. Their poignant criticism of other faiths and especially Islam roused indignation in highest quarters. Learned Malvis from other parts of India followed after speeches. The government had to curtail the freedom of speech, etc. Their orders and ordinance applied to all, but under the prevailing circumstances. Naturally enough, while Muslims could easily get permission for meetings and processions, the Hindus or the Arya Samaj could not. Agraha of 1935. It was a fight for civil and religious liberty. Exaggerated accounts, by no means baseless accounts of religious intolerance in Hyderabad were spread all over India. Somehow Satyagraha ended. There was a section of the population that wanted to start a movement on communal lines. Mahatma Gandhi deliberately kept them back, so that their movement may not get mixed up with the communal movement then going on. Soon after, the state Congress movement for responsible government followed. Naturally, Nizam tried to suppress it. Again the Hindus in the state were 85% of the total population. Communal antagonism and distrust of each other prevailing in the rest of India could leave Hyderabad unaffected. The Muslims were afraid that responsible government in Hyderabad meant rule the majority, that is Hindu Raj. The Muslims generally opposed the state Congress movement. To exactly the same extent, the state Congress movement began, in practice, a communal aspect. Suppressed inside, they organized their centers outside the state. and from where attacked post offices and police stations inside the Hyderabad state. The state Congress movement in Hyderabad was admittedly a violent movement. They used arms and ammunitions, explosives and dynamite. The secretary has admitted in his official movement over 2,000 of the enemy lost their lives. Violence bred communalism encouraged violence. The Ittihad Muslimin, which was originally a religious and social reform movement, became a mainly political movement. Its main objective being resisting the Hindu movement. The Hindu demand for democratic government. The Razakar were the military wing of the Ittihad Muslimin. Thus the sweet relations that existed between the two communities in the state gradually vanished and Hyderabad became one of the hotbed for communal tensions. During our tours, we also heard the statement of Razakars' atrocities. We visited several places that had suffered most under the previous regime. The main period of Razakar atrocities was between August 15, 1947 and the year 1948. Their atrocities chiefly consisted in levying monthly amounts on every town and village. Wherever these amounts were willingly paid, there was generally no further trouble. But at places they were resisted, loot followed. If there was no resistance during the loot, the trouble gradually ended, in the removal of looted property, sometime in motor trucks. But wherever there was further resistance, arson, murder, desecration of temples, even rape and abduction of women followed. The police and the administration mainly manned mostly by the Muslims, either convinced by the atrocities or willingly cooperated with the Razakars in all these lawless activities because they believed that the Razakars alone could save them from the Hindu Raj. And such had the support who thought otherwise, found themselves helpless. The accounts of these atrocities appear in a section of the Indian and foreign press in an exaggerated form, side by side with the Razakars' openly lawless activities. A new movement was started by the Muslims, which gained a momentum rapidly, to induce Muslims from the neighboring Indian provinces to migrate to the state and settle there, so that in course of time, the Muslim minority might be converted. Or if not majority, at least to a formidable minority. Thousands of Muslims were thus inveigled into Hyderabad and some of them still there. Thousands of Hindus who had in the regime immediately preceding left their hearts and homes either on account of Razakar atrocities or through sheer panic and taken refuge in Indian territories came back to their homes in the state. As soon as heard of the achievements of Indian Army as their saviors and heaved a sign of relief. Both these sections of the Hindu populace were more or less saturated with the communal venom. Many of them had actually suffered at the hands of the Razakars and their supporters, the Nizam administration. The settled and declared policy of Indian government was the establishment of peace and the suppression of all lawlessness. Many officers and men acted up to it, yet there were many others who allowed their suppressed communal feelings full play. We are also in armed men belonging to well-known Hindu communal organization filtered into the Hyderabad state along with the Indian Army from Sholapur and other towns on this side of the border. The Muslim population naturally felt panicky the advent of the Indian Army. The Indian Army, wherever it went, the order applied to Hindus and Muslims alike. But in practice, while all arms were taken away from the Muslims, sometimes with the help of Hindu population, the Hindu from whom the Indian military had little to fear were left in possession of their arms. In one of the villages which we visited, we acted with the help of Hindu population. The Hindu from whom the Indian military had little to fear were left in possession of their arms. In one of the villages which we visited, we actually took away an unregistered and unlicensed double-barrel .303 rifle from a young Hindu and registered and unlicensed double-barrel .303 rifle from a young Hindu and deposited it within the authorities in Hyderabad state. But the policy of leaving the Hindus in possessions of their arms was almost general. It must be remembered that the Muslims everywhere outside the city of Hyderabad were prey to the communal Hindus' fury, which took the form of murder, arson, loot, desecration of mosques, rapes of Muslim women, abduction of Muslim women in a large number of places, almost through the Hyderabad state. 4 out of 16 districts of Hyderabad state suffered the most, namely Osmanabad, Nanded, Bidar and Gulbarga, in the town of Osmanabad, which is the district headquarters. A very reliable gentleman who was in 6-month jail in the previous regime on accounts of his anti-Razakars activities. At our instance, went from home to home, and after due inquiry prepared for us a list of Muslims, persons who had been killed in Osmanabad proper town. Rumors runs very high, but the list prepared by this gentleman, which we are convinced 5 is murdered and another 190 missing, many of whom are believed to have been murdered. The town of Latur in the same district fared even worse. Some witnesses told us that the number of Muslims murdered in Latur was somewhere between 2,000 and 2,500. Conclusion that the total Muslims killed in Latur proper town or in its neighborhood could in no case have been less than 1,000. The village of Moram comes third. There, according to a Hindu Congress worker, the number of Muslim dead are nearly 300 or 400, and according to a Muslim version, nearly 1,000 of Muslims in the district, only few remained unaffected. At a moderate estimate, the total number of Muslims murdered in this district must have been somewhere between 5,005 and 10,000. According to the evidence before us, Gulbarga districts comes next. We may not enter into the details about various places in the district. Our idea is that the total Muslims killed in Gulbarga district must have been between 5,000 and 8,000. The district of Bidar fared at least as ill as if nor worse than Gulbarga. The 4th district is Nanded, with the total Muslim Gulbarga. The 4th district is Nanded, with the total Muslims killed according to our estimate somewhere between 2,000 to 4,000. When we talk of killed, we do not include those who died fighting, but only those who murdered in cold blood. The district headquarters of Aurangabad officers capturing the town. His behavior was reported to have been exemplary, and the steps that he took were effective. But even he could not save the 1,000 and odd villages. Our idea is that the total number of Muslims killed in the district of Aurangabad must have been somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000. After scrutinizing the evidence, we could get about the district. We estimate the total number of Muslims killed there was somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500. We visited only 2 more districts, Nalgonda and Medak. They appear to have been less affected than the others we visited. In Nalgonda, in the few villages that we could visit or about which we got evidence, the total Muslim deaths appear to have been 500 to 600 roughly. Through the district we may safely put the total number of Muslim killed as 1,000, at least. In the Medak district, we could visit only 5 villages which happened to be on the roadside on our way. And in these our estimate of total number of Muslims killed is only 30. We also got evidence of 3 other places in the district, including the number of Muslims killed there appears to have been 45. We were told that out of nearly 1,500 villages, very few if any in the district remained unaffected. And so the total number of Muslims killed in the entire district can safely be put at 1,000. Thus our total of those Muslims killed must have been somewhere between 23,000 and 36,000. Out of the remaining 7 districts of the Hyderabad state, not counting the Atrafi Baldia, Hyderabad city, we got some evidence of about 4,000. The remaining 3 districts Mahbub notically through not wholly unaffected. Thus, at a very reasonable and modest estimate, we think that the total number of Muslim deaths in the Hyderabad state may well have been somewhere between 30,000 and 40,000. They could in no way have been less than 25,000. In connection with this killing, we might just mention a few more facts. It appears that as the Muslim population fled in panic towards the headquarters of the state or towards other villages which they though might be safer, a very large number was killed on the way and in the jungles. In many places we were shown water wells, still full of corpses that were rotting. In one such we counted 11 bodies, which included that of a woman with a small child sticking to her breast. In another we saw that earth had been thrown over. The of horror that had been committed was scattered all around. We saw several more water wells, we saw remnants of corpses lying in ditches. At several places the bodies had been burned, and we could see the charred bones and skulls still lying there. At these spots we also heard the statements accompanying crying of widows and destitute of women and children, in whose presence the male members of their families had been killed and burned. We tried to console them by telling them that the responsibility of all misfortunes lay upon the shoulders of those of their coreligionists who had established a reign of terror for the Hindus in assuring them that the new government wanted all Hindus and Muslims to live once more in peace like good neighbors and brothers. As for loot, this appears to have been much more general than murder. Several of the places which we've rich business centers with a good number of Kuchi and other Muslim merchants and industrialists. They have all been practically finished. The common and poorer Muslims have fared worse. From what we have seen, we can say without any exaggeration that in a greater part of Hyderabad state, the entire Muslim tens of thousands have been rendered penniless. Thousands of houses are lying roofless with their doors broken and all belongings gone. We may not enter into the details of the evidence before us. Yet we are sure that the total property looted or destroyed in the Hyderabad state must be calculated in tens of crores. At most places arson was also the order of the day. Crimes against Muslim women were no means uncommon. We have it again on incontrovertible evidence that many Muslim women threw themselves into water wells to save their honor. Sometimes they first threw their children and jumped in themselves. Many Muslim women were forcibly taken away from their homes, kept for a number of days and then sent back to their homes. This happened in every district that we visited. We were all houses of Hindus. As also at several places, Muslim properties and Muslim houses were still in the illegal possession of the Hindus. But we must hasten to the state that by far the largest of such a movable property and such Muslim women, through not movable property, has been returned to Muslims. This too was a universal factor, almost everywhere we went. After the Muslim adult males of a locality had been killed, the women and children generally persuaded to adopt Hindu faith. We came across hundreds of Muslim women who had been forcibly tattooed on the forehead, right in the some had even their new Hindu names tattooed on their forearms. We saw children whose ears has been freshly bored in the Hindu style, breads had been shaved off. We sacred thread hanging around necks of the Muslims. We were told that at various places that a certain minister had gone from place to place converting such helpless women and children into Hinduism and distributing sacred threads, etc. Here also we must add that with the exemption of a small number of Muslim women are still in Hindu homes, all such forcible conversions have become null and void in practice. In one important town we were pained to notice that a prominent Arya Samaj man took the law into his own hands. He converted local Arya Samaj Mandir into jail. Arrested, kept them 4 to 5 days in his jail. Either released them on getting some money from them or handed them over to the police as Razakars. This went on for about a month. When the Arya Samaj building proved insufficient for the purpose of another building in the vicinity was also availed of, we visited both inquiries on the spot. At some place we were informed that the victims were removed to some adjoining temple and then finished off in the sacred precincts. We think it is our duty to say a word here about the State Congress in this connection. Professedly the State Congress is a non-communal body. There may be, and we believe there are, individuals in it above communal prejudice. But we have no doubt that there is at least a section of congressmen who have not been able raised to the desired height. In a large number of cases, soon after the Operation Polo took the law into their own hands almost as a parallel administration, not always to their credit. At several places we heard the complaint that some people were going about to various Muslims who either did not leave their homes or have since returned and were forcible extracting money from them. Place we were told that out of every rupee thus received 4 annas went to the man releasing the amount, 4 annas to the police, and remaining 8 annas to the Congress. We may not have believed such stories. But at one place the deputy superintendent of police told us of his own accord by the way of complaint that the Congress people are making the administration difficult by such forcible realizations. When we put this complaint before 2 prominent Congress leaders at Hyderabad, they admitted that some such complaints had reached the Congress headquarters at Hyderabad also. At one important town, a rich Kutchi merchant whose shop had been looted and burned could only get his damaged building back after passing the check for rupees 15,000 in the name of some local congressman. Besides that, men we were told have auctioned cultivable lands left by Muslims on a deed to local Hindus, that is, on condition that half the crops should be handed to the Congress. We are sure that DUAMLI can neither help the administration nor raise the reputation. We have also to say something about the Indian Army, splendidly well. Major General J.N. Chaudhry, we found, a man of above all communal prejudice. He is trying his best that the 2 communities live peacefully together on terms of absolute equality. Many of his subordinate also of the same spirit. But here again we have communal feelings. At a number of places members of armed forces brought out Muslim adult males from villages and towns and massacred them in cold blood. At many places they encouraged and even persuaded Hindu mobs to loot Muslim shops and Muslim homes. At some places they even persuaded Hindu mobs to loot Muslim shops and Muslim homes. At some places they even joined in the looting. In one district town, the present Hindu head of administration told us that there was a general loot of Muslim shops by the military and they had looted even the government buildings. Looting. In one district town, the present Hindu head of administration told us that there was a general loot of Muslim shops by the military and they had looted even the government buildings. In another district, a Munsif house had been looted by the soldiers and Tahsildar's wife molested. In loot we were generally told at many places that cash, gold and silver was taken away by the military, whilst other articles fell to the share of the mob. These things have naturally upset the Muslim population in the Hyderabad state. They all feel more or less panicky. The Operation Polo, 1948. Some were suspected of sympathy with the old regime. Naturally, there were changes in the new appointments. This too was natural that most of those newly taken in should be Hindus. Some were imported outside the Hyderabad state. Were changes in the new appointments. This too was natural that most of those newly taken in should be Hindus. Some were imported outside the Hyderabad state. The government had to appoint people upon whom it could depend. But it was equally natural that the educated Muslims should feel suspicious about it. Many Hindus lower in service had been appointed to higher posts by supersession over a number of Muslims higher up in service. Many Muslims had been suspended on mere suspicions. More were directed to go on leave. In some cases the promotion to make a room for a gentleman from the Indian Union, and to continue as a puny judge. By officials of the past and present administration and by responsible individuals has been carefully discounted by us in arriving at the conclusions which we have placed before you. Pandit Sunderlal submitted his report to Union Home Minister at that time. Home Minister reacted angrily to the Pandit Sunderlal Committee report. He insulted the Pandit Sunderlal who forwarded the report to him. He also punished Pandit Sunderlal. Home Minister buried the Pandit Sunderlal report through his political influence. From time to time, there was a demand to declassify the Pandit Sunderlal Committee report. Finally in 2013, From time to time, there was a demand to declassify the Pandit Sunderlal Committee report. Finally in 2013, Pandit Sunderlal Committee report was released from Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in New Delhi. Through and Right to Committee report was released from Nehru Memorial Museum and Library in New Delhi. Through and Right to Information Act, RTI, applied by an Telangana historian. Now this report is in public domain. Swaminathan wrote an article in Times of India. The Gujarat election will revive charges that Narendra Modi killed 1,000 Muslims in the 2002 Gujarat riots, with the BJP accusing Rajiv Gandhi of killing 3,000 Sikhs in the 1984 Delhi riots. To get a sense of perspective, I did some research on communal riots in past decades. I was astounded to find that the greatest communal slaughter occurred under neither Modi nor Rajiv but Nehru. His takeover of Hyderabad in 1948 caused maybe 50,000 to 200,000 deaths. The Sunderlal report on this massacre has been kept an official secret for over 60 years. While other princes acceded to either India or Pakistan in 1947, the Nizam of Hyderabad aimed to remain independent. The Nizam's Islamic militia, the Razakars, killed and raped many Hindus. This incensed Sardar Patel and Nehru, who ordered the army into Hyderabad. The army's swift victory led to revenge killings and rapes by Hindus on an unprecedented scale. Civil Professor Cantwell Smith, a critic of Jinnah. In the Middle Eastern Journal, 1950. The only careful report on what happened in this period was made a few months later by investigators, including a Congress Muslim and a sympathetic and admired Hindu, Professor Pandit Sunderlal. Commissioned by the Indian government. The report was submitted but has not been published. Presumably it makes unpleasant reading. It is widely held that the figure mentioned therein for the number of Muslims massacred is 50,000. Other estimates by responsible observers run as high as 200,000. A lower but still horrific estimate comes from UCLA professor Perry Anderson. When the Indian army took over Hyderabad, massive Hindu pogroms against the Muslim population, the figurehead Muslim congressman in Delhi, Maulana Azad, then Minister of Education, prevailed on Nehru to let a team investigate. It reported that at a conservative estimate between 27,000 and 40,000 Muslims had been slaughtered in the space of a few weeks after the massacre in the history of the Indian Union. dwarfing the killings by the Pathan raiders en route to Srinagar, which India has ever since used as the casus belli for its annexation of Kashmir. Nehru, on proclaiming Indian victory in Hyderabad, had announced that not a single communal receiving the report. He suppressed it, and at Patel's urging cancelled the appointment of one of its authors as ambassador in the Middle East. No word about the pogroms, in which his own troops had taken eager part, could be allowed to leak out. 20 years later, when news of the report finally surfaced, his daughter banned the publication of the document as injurious to national interests. Harry Anderson is accused by some of anti-Indian bias. This cannot be said of author William Dalrymple. In The Age of Cali, Dalrymple says the Sunderlal report has been leaked and published abroad, and estimates that as many as 200,000 Hyderabadi Muslims were slaughtered. Our textbooks and TV programs show Sardar Patel and Nehru as demigods who created a unified India. Of the Hyderabad Massacre in our standard history books, just as Pakistani textbooks have deleted reference to the East Pakistan Massacre of 1971. The airbrushing of Patel and Nehru is complete. My friends ask, why rake up the 1948 horrors now? Why rake up the 1948 horrors now? You sound like an apologist for Modi's killings of 2002. I can only say that the killings of 1948 cannot possibly justify the killings of 2002, or 1984, or any others. Modi has blood. I can only say that the killings of 1948 cannot possibly justify the killings of 2002, or 1984, or any others. Modi has blood on his hands, whether or not he was directly culpable. But why pretend that others had spotlessly clean hands? There is a magic in the praises Modi has recently heaped on Patel. The two are not entirely dissimilar. Nations need to acknowledge their past errors in order to avoid them in the future. Germany acknowledged the horrors of fascism and militarism, and this helped it build a new anti-war society. Citizens are kept in dark about the biggest pogrom since independence. Even after foreign sources have lifted the lid, India's jihadi press is fully aware of the 1948 massacre, and projects its censorship as evidence of Hindu oppression. This is not how a liberal democracy should nation on the basis of suppressed reports and sanitized textbooks. The Pandit Sunderlal report must be made public. This audio ends now.